My name is Amalia Mesa-Bains. I'm an artist and an educator, and one of the things I want to talk about today is my show at the Fresno Art Museum, Geography of Memory. It's a series of collected works from 1991 to 2011. I've been working in the last number of years around the idea of a geography of memory, and currently I have a show at the Fresno Art Museum in which I have pursued existing pieces and reorganize them into a cohesive vision of this geography of memory. So in the Fresno Art Museum, I have 5 installations. One that was done for the Road to Aztlán at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art in 2001 that's called Transparent Migrations. And it's about Aztlán, which was among Chicanos a kind of geopolitical space in which we referred to our ancestry. But in 2001, Virginia Fields, the late Virginia Fields of LACMA, put together an extraordinary show in which she actually captured the real artifacts of Aztlán, which was the space that we would define as northern Mexico and the southwestern United States. And in that show, she was able to accumulate artifacts, sacred books, feather paintings, all kinds of religious and sacred material that was traded between tribes within this region that we call Aztlán. And it comes from, I believe, the Aztec word or the Nahuatl word for Aztitlán, which means the place of the herons. So it was a northern part of Mexico. And that show, Road to Aztlán, gave me a chance to do this larger piece. Then I also included the Private Landscapes and Public Territories piece, which has 2 parts to it. It has an armoire that has a photograph of the very first orchard in which my family lived when I was born. My father was a farm worker and a ranch hand, and when I was born in Santa Clara Valley, much, much prior to Silicon Valley, it was all orchards. There were very few streets, and mostly it was a farm working community. My trajectory in my own life was to go from farm working to cannery work to university. It's kind of how I paid my way through. So the stories that I'm talking about in these pieces, which are in a way almost like artificial paradise, they're gardens that I construct from digitized materials, from moss, from plants that I make up. They're my way of talking about the richness of our life on the land. I want very much to sort of give back dignity to the people who labor in the land. Because I was born in a particular historical period of time, and the Chicano movement gave me an opportunity. I was the first in my family to go to university. I managed to get a master's, two masters and a PhD in clinical psych, and I was given a MacArthur Fellowship in 1991. So I would say that my life took a very different turn than the life I was born into. But I understand that the life I was born into gave me the resiliency, the physical strength, and to some degree the tenacity, because I'm the child of laborers. My mother was a maid. My father worked in the fields. Gave me the tenacity to take advantage of the opportunities that only come in a country like the United States. I am very clear about that. If my parents had stayed in Mexico and married there, I never would have had this life. But these works that I do are somewhat like allegories, but they're also social history pieces, because that's how I work. I think sometimes you can get people to look at the most confrontational and vigorous investigation through art, because art is beautiful, because art is compelling, and because people are willing to consider ideas that if you tried to make them read a book about it, or if you tried to tell them about it, they simply wouldn't listen to you. So my way of working is to take these elements, and sometimes they rest within the Mesoamerican world, which I have a great interest. And in my years in San Francisco, I was an art commissioner, and so I was able to work with the de Young Museum and a number of other places on the actual exhibitions of Teotihuacan and a number of the other Mesoamerican collections. So I had a chance to work with archaeologists and anthropologists from both Mexico and the United States to kind of be educated, as it were, about those ideas. So I have a piece of a giant sleeping woman in a garden, and it's called the Garden of Cihuatlampa. And Cihuatlampa was the place in the Aztec afterlife where women who died in childbirth went as a place of honor. So only warriors and women who died in childbirth could be honored in the Aztec afterlife. And I always felt, since I was a childless woman, a married woman without children, very unique in Mexican culture, I always felt like I was a bit of a warrior myself. So I gave myself my own Cihuatlampa garden and made a figure that looks a little bit like a series of mountains, Mother Earth. So all of these pieces in the Fresno show deal with the idea of social landscape and human geography. The third piece in there is one called Curanderas Botanica, and a curandera is a healer. And in the Mexican and indigenous tradition of healing, the mind and the body never can be separated. The natural and supernatural are connected, and the cure is always collective and never singular. Because when we fall ill, we don't fall ill by ourselves, we become ill within a system. It's not unlike what Deepak Chopra and Ando Weil talk about in contemporary alternative health and culture. But for me, the curandera was a very real thing because my father and my grandmother, Mariana Escobedo, they participated in traditions of healing. When my father was young, they sprinkled snake powder over his food because he had a lot of boils and lesions on his skin, and for the rest of his life, his skin healed from anything, a cut, a laceration, faster than anyone I ever knew. And when he was young, he had pulmonary problems, so they soaked branches in water that were, I think, probably pine. In my research, I found that pine produced a resin that actually creates oxygenation in the lungs. So over time, my father had all these cures, and I learned them. And so when I was injured in a very catastrophic accident in 2003, in which I broke my neck, my arm, my leg, and various other parts of my body, and it took me a number of years to heal, I practiced some of the traditions because it's believed in the tradition of curanderismo that the mind and body are always connected and that the soul has a role in one's health and healing. And if you suffer a great susto, which we could take to mean shock, and the accident was most definitely a major susto. I had to be cut out of the car. It was a long recovery. In susto, it's believed that the soul will flee the body. And if the soul flees the body, what you see then is what you see in shock. Depression, lack of animation, listlessness, and I had all of those things. So I worked on the practices for returning my soul to my body. I did also what the doctors told me, and I did homeopathic medicines, but all of the stories that are in this geography memory deal with the idea of the land, of nature, and of spirit. And then I finished it out with two new pieces that have to do with the botanical archive, and it is a series of cast plants and hand-drawn books that sort of follow the traditions of healing and the plants that go with it. I picked Fresno, or Fresno picked me, because I was given the Distinguished Woman Artist Award, mainly because I have a very large family there, and I often try to work in museums in which there are larger Mexican communities. I feel my work is open to all kinds of people. I did this Curanderas Botanica at the Menil in Houston, which is the uber white cube, and I was fascinated because the people who were most interested in my work were older women, mostly white, because it's a very wealthy patronage, who could relate to the idea of death and healing. And one of the things that I came away from this project with is that the space between living and dying is healing. And we spend all of our lives trying to right ourselves and find a balance in the ways that our bodies and our souls operate. And that function of healing carries us to the end. And I think of death, because I was with my mom and my dad when they died. I think of death as the ultimate healing. It's when we finally reach that kind of end point and we can let go of this form of energy. So my works rest in all kinds of intersections of personal biography, social history, theory, I am close with a number of theorists, Michael Deere and others, who write on human geography. And so those are the products of, I think, one's cultural, artistic, and intellectual life.